I have spent years chasing the stories that make your blood run cold, the ones that linger in the dark corners of your mind long after the lights are out. I run a YouTube channel where I unravel true horror stories, tales of real people caught in moments so terrifying they defy reason. I've covered murders, hauntings and mysteries, but there's one case that's haunted me more than any other, a story so chilling it redefined horror for generations. It's the Exorcism of Roland Doe, a 14-year-old boy from Maryland whose battle with an unseen force in 1949 shook the world and inspired The Exorcist. This isn't just a story, it's a descent into a nightmare that left priests trembling, witnesses scarred, and an entire nation questioning what lies beyond the veil. Buckle up, because this is the Exorcism of Roland Doe, a true demonic possession, and it's going to keep you on edge until the very last word. I first heard about Roland Doe when I was a kid, sneaking a copy of the Exorcist novel from my uncle's bookshelf. The book terrified me, but what hit harder was the note on the cover, based on a true story. I didn't sleep for days, imagining a boy my age fighting something I couldn't see. Years later, as I started the channel, I dove into the real case, piecing together newspaper clippings, Jesuit diaries, and first-hand accounts from those who were there. Roland Doe wasn't his real name. His identity was protected, later revealed as Ronald Edwin Hunkler, but the details of what happened to him are anything but secret. They're etched into history, witnessed by dozens, documented in chilling detail. This is the story of a boy, a family, and a force that turned their lives into a living hell. It all began in January 1949 in Cottage City, Maryland, a quiet suburb where the houses were neat and the streets were lined with maple trees. Roland was 13, a lanky kid with a shy smile and a love for comic books. He lived with his parents, Edwin and Odell Hunkler, and his grandmother Harriet, in a modest two-story home. The family was Lutheran, not deeply religious but close-knit, the kind of people who ate dinner together every night. Roland was an only child, a bit introverted, but happy enough, spending his days at school and his evenings playing board games with his aunt Tilly, who lived nearby. Tilly was special to Roland. She was a spiritualist, someone who believed in contacting the dead, and she taught him to use an Ouija board, a wooden plank with letters and numbers they'd use to talk to spirits. It was a game, or so they thought, until Tilly died unexpectedly that winter. That's when everything changed. Roland was devastated by Tilly's death. She'd been his confidant, his partner in adventure. He started spending hours with the Ouija board, alone in his room, trying to reach her. His parents noticed he was withdrawn, but they chalked it up to grief. Then the noises started. It began with scratching, like claws scraping inside the walls of their home. At first, they thought it was mice. Edwin even called an exterminator. But the sounds followed Roland, growing louder when he was near. They'd hear it at night, a rhythmic clawing that seemed to come from his bedroom, stopping when anyone entered. Then the furniture began to move. A heavy armchair in the living room would slide across the floor, stopping at Roland's feet. His bed would shake, the frame rattling against the wall, even when he wasn't in it. Odell, a practical woman, tried to explain it away. Old pipes, a settling house, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. By late January, the disturbances escalated. Roland's behaviour changed. He'd stare blankly for hours, his eyes glassy, unresponsive. At school, his desk would rock violently, books flying off without explanation. His teachers, alarmed, sent him home, whispering about something wrong with the boy. At night, he'd scream, his voice roar, as if something were tearing him apart. Red scratches appeared on his body, welts that spelled out words, first help, then Louis, as if directing the family somewhere. Edwin and Odell were terrified, but they didn't know where to turn. They weren't Catholic, didn't believe in possession, but the Ouija board connection gnawed at them. They contacted their Lutheran pastor, Reverend Luther Schultze, a calm, scholarly man who agreed to observe Roland. Schultze spent a night at the Hunkler home, and what he saw shook him. Roland's bed levitated an inch off the floor, trembling as he lay rigid, his eyes rolled back. The scratching filled the room, louder, faster, like a swarm of insects trapped in the walls. Schultze, a skeptic of the supernatural, tried to pray, but Roland snarled, his voice deep and guttural, nothing like a child's. "You can't help him," the voice said, chilling Schultze to his core. He suggested the family seek Catholic help, believing only the church's ancient rituals could confront what he'd witnessed. Desperate, the Hunklers reached out to Father Edward Albert Hughes, a young priest at St. James Catholic Church in nearby Mount Rainier. Hughes visited in early February, bringing holy water and a crucifix. Roland was strapped to his bed, his wrists bound with cloth to keep him from clawing himself. The room was cold, the air heavy, like a storm was brewing inside the walls. Hughes began the rite of exorcism, reading from the Roman ritual, but Roland reacted violently. His body arched, his restraints snapping as he lunged at the priest, slashing Hughes's arm with a shard of glass from a broken lamp. Words appeared on Roland's chest. "Hell!" in jagged red lines, and the room filled with a sulphuric stench. Hughes, bleeding and shaken, retreated, advising the family to take Roland to St. Louis, where the Jesuits at St. Louis University had experience with such cases. The word Louis on Roland's body seemed to confirm it. In late February, the Hunklers packed their car and drove 900 miles to St. Louis, staying with Roland's aunt and uncle, who were Catholic and connected to the local clergy. There, they met Father Raymond J. Bishop, a Jesuit priest and professor, and Father William S. Bowden, a stern but compassionate pastor at St. Francis Xavier Church. Both men were skeptical, but agreed to evaluate Roland, now 14, at the rectory. What they saw erased their doubts. Roland's body contorted, his limbs twisting at impossible angles. He spoke in Latin, a language he'd never studied, cursing the priests with intimate knowledge of their fears. Objects flew, books, candles, a rosary, crashing against the walls. His eyes, once blue, were black, unblinking, like they belonged to someone else. Bishop kept a diary, noting every detail, later shared with author William Peter Blatty, who'd based The Exorcist on it. The Jesuits sought permission from Archbishop Joseph Ritter, who approved a formal exorcism, a rare and secretive rite. Bowden led the team, joined by Bishop, Father Walter Halloran, a young seminarian, and Brother John Corcoran, a lay assistant. They began on March 9, 1949, in the rectory's upstairs room, where Roland was restrained on a cot. The priests wore cassocks, their faces pale but resolute, clutching Bibles and holy water. The room was bare, the windows covered, the only light from a flickering bulb, as Bowden recited the prayers, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Roland roared, his voice a chorus of growls, some male, some female, none human. "You'll burn for this," one voice spat, while another laughed high and piercing. The bed shook, the frame bending, and scratches appeared on the walls spelling Satan. Their exorcisms continued for weeks, each session more grueling. Roland's strength was unnatural. He broke Halloran's nose with a single blow, tore restraints like paper, and once hurled a 50-pound dresser across the room. His body would rise, hovering inches above the cot, then crash down, bones cracking, but never breaking. The priests saw visions, shadowy figures in the corners, faces leering from the ceiling. The air grew thick, reeking of decay, and the temperature plummeted, frosting their breath. Roland spoke of their sins, taunting Baudin about a childhood lie, Bishop about a moment of doubt. He'd vomit, a black bile that burned the floor, and his skin would blister when touched with a crucifix. Yet between episodes, he was Roland again, scared, pleading, begging them to save him. The Hunkelers staying nearby were unravelling. Odell prayed constantly, her rosary beads worn from use, while Edwin drank to dull the fear. They moved Roland to the Alexian Brothers Hospital, a Catholic facility with a sealed 5th-floor wing to protect him and others. There, the exorcisms intensified. On March 20th, Roland seized, his body arching so violently his spine seemed to snap. A voice claiming to be Satan demanded the priest stop, promising to kill them. Halloran, the youngest, felt a hand, cold, invisible, grip his throat, lifting him off the ground. He gasped, clutching his stole, until Baudin's prayers forced it to release. The hospital staff, sworn to secrecy, heard screams echoing through the halls, and some quit, unable to bear the terror. By April, the priests were exhausted, their voices hoarse, their bodies bruised. They'd performed over 30 exorcisms, each draining them further. Roland was wasting away, his weight dropping, his face gaunt. But he fought, clinging to moments of clarity, whispering, "I don't want to die." The priests fasted, prayed, and sought guidance from St. Michael, the archangel of spiritual warfare. On April 18th, 1949, the final battle came. It was Holy Week, the air heavy with the weight of Easter. Roland was in the hospital, strapped to a steel bed, his body covered in welts. Baudin led the right, his voice steady despite the chaos. The room shook, windows rattling, as Roland's voice screamed, "I am Legion!" a biblical reference to a host of demons. The priest pressed on, chanting, "Depart, unclean spirit." Then, at 10:45 p.m, a vision appeared to Roland, a glowing figure, sword in hand, later described as St. Michael. His body convulsed, a deafening roar filled the room, and he collapsed, silent. When he opened his eyes, they were clear. "He's gone," Roland said, his voice soft, his own. The priests wept, falling to their knees, thanking God. The room was still, the air warm again, the stench gone. Roland slept for the first time in weeks, undisturbed. The next day, he was calm, eating, laughing, a boy again. The Hunkelers returned to Maryland, and Roland resumed his life, never speaking publicly of what happened. The aftermath was seismic. The case, witnessed by 48 people, including 9 Jesuits, leaked to the press. A 1949 Washington Post article called it a battle with the devil, sparking national fascination. The Catholic Church, wary of sensationalism, suppressed details. But Father Bishop's diary reached Blatty, a Georgetown student who turned it into The Exorcist. The book and 1973 film terrified millions. cementing Roland's story in pop culture. Ronald Hunkler grew up, worked as a NASA engineer, and died in 2020 at 85, always denying the possession narrative, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But those who were there, Halloran, who lived until 2005, and others, never wavered. They'd seen evil, they said, and it was real. I've read Bishop's diary, studied the accounts, even tracked down a nurse who worked at the Alexian Brothers Hospital, now demolished. She was young then, swore she heard the screams, felt the cold in her bones. I've stood outside the Cottage City house, still standing, its windows dark, like it's watching. I don't know what possessed Roland Doe. Was it demons, as the priest believed? A mental breakdown amplified by grief and suggestion? Or something we can't name? The scratches, the voices, the levitation. 48 witnesses, including skeptics, saw it. That's what keeps me up at night. The tapes, if they exist, are locked away, but the story lives, whispering in the shadows. This is the exorcism of Roland Doe, and it's not just a tale of horror, it's a warning. Some games, like an Ouija board, aren't games at all. Some doors, once opened, don't close, and some battles leave scars that never fade, even if you survive. You've heard the story. Now ask yourself, what would you do if the scratching started in your walls? What would you believe if the voice wasn't yours? Sleep tight, because this one's real and it's closer than you think.